For tickets and showtimes, visit fathomevents.com.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Ben Mankiewicz. Welcome to the first night of TCM's Friday Night Spotlight on special effects wizard A. Arnold Gillespie. Joining me now are my co-hosts every Friday night this month, Academy Award winners Craig Barron and Ben Burt. Glad to have you with me, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
Craig and Ben have joined me to discuss the creativity and technical artistry that went into Arnold Gillespie's work, starting with his contributions to our first movie tonight, 1939's The Wizard of Oz. Arnold Gillespie, known to everybody who knew him as Buddy Gillespie, ran MGM's special effects department. Where does he fit in the pantheon of cinema? How important is Buddy Gillespie?
Well, Buddy Gillespie is one of the great visual effects practitioners. He was the guy that would have to come up with how they would create or photograph various visual effects in any of the MGM movies. I believe he was the longest employee at MGM, having worked on the original Ben-Hur and then also the remake. So his career is very extensive. And as being a head of the visual effects department, he would have various departments underneath him, like the matte painting department or miniatures, and all these various techniques would be used on a day-by-day basis while they were producing the movies at MGM.
And when you're starting in the 20s in the silent era, you don't have decades of technical know-how to fall back on. Much of what he came up with was trial and error, correct?
He started as an artist and was a set designer and an art director at the studio initially. He'd be part of the team that would be designing sets and the look of a film. On the original Ben-Hur, he was in the art department, as well as the first Tarzan movies. By the mid-1930s, since there was a close alignment between the art department and special effects, the special effects department was something growing with the studio. There was really nothing preceding it. So he eventually became the supervisor of the special effects department.
Tonight, The Wizard of Oz. Now, 76 years ago now, 1939, The Wizard of Oz. Most of what we remember fondly of this movie is the special effects wizardry, is it not?
The film is full of illusions.
Yeah.
You know, everything from the creation of the land of Oz to a flying witch to flying monkeys. Those illusions are accomplished in a variety of techniques that the MGM special effects department would be asked to be challenged to do. There would be mechanical effects, things they would have to build, wire riggings. There would be optical effects, trick photography, and so on. There'd be special sound effects.
Yeah, and obviously probably the biggest visual effect for the film would be the tornado that Gillespie would have to create. And this is a process of the visual effects artist would get the script, and he would know that the tornado plays a major part of the film, and you would have to find a way to practically create one that looks realistic and dramatic and serves the purposes of the storytelling process for the movie.
Well, tell me.
How did they do it?
How do we get a tornado that doesn't threaten the life of every cast member and crew member of The Wizard of Oz?
Well, it might have threatened them. I don't know. It was actually a pretty impressive setup. The story goes is that Gillespie was a pilot, and as he would work on his airplane and be around the airport, he would notice that there was a windsock, which is the device that tells you which way the wind is blowing so that when you land your airplane, you can do it safely. And he noticed that the windsock sort of looked like a tornado. So the idea was to take the windsock and scale it up much bigger and install it on a soundstage with a gantry so that it could funnel down to a little cart that could move around. And by having this big burlap windsock, in this case now the tornado, spinning with a motor, the device could move back and forth over the soundstage, over a miniature. They would also have glass clouds, two glasses with cotton clouds moving over the top of it to sort of create this diorama effect of a practical tornado. They would also shoot Fuller's earth through it to make dust. And again, why it's so effective is the sense that it's a dark shape moving through the environment. It's frightening. It's backlit by bright clouds. You don't quite see it. You see its effect on the environment. And ultimately, it's a very successful visual effect for the movie.
And then it comes over buildings that are drawn to what scale?
Well, the scale is based on how big they could install this tornado practically on the set. The Dorothy's farmhouse would be a scale.
It's 3 feet high.
About 3 feet high.
3 feet high, the farmhouse that you would see. And the tornado was 35 feet high, something of the entire height of the soundstage.
Again, made at a size that they could blow dust and photograph it to look realistic, so that it had a good impact and a sense of drama and scale.
And then, Ben, how do we get the sound of a tornado? Does somebody go out and record an actual tornado?
No, that would be great if they could, but how could you possibly, predict such a thing? The MGM sound department, which would complete these illusions, in the case of the tornado in The Wizard of Oz, used a wind machine like you'd have in an old radio show. At that time, they often built props to create the sound of things that you couldn't easily record. You stretch a piece of canvas over a wooden drum and turn it, you would get a different pitch sound, which people would think sounded like wind. And if you did a few different tracks of that at different speeds, you could mix it together. And that became the sound of the tornado to complete that whole illusion.
And then when we see Dorothy in front of the tornado as it approaches, how are they doing that?
Well, ultimately, of course, when you create great visual effects, you then need to combine your actors with them in some way so that there's a sense that they are being a part of the scene. And so at MGM, what they did was used rear projection. The technique would be to build a partial set where Dorothy would be able to observe the rear projector, which would be showing the previously photographed footage of the tornado. And then the camera would photograph her with the rear projection screen together to make a new composite image.
So they're projecting the movie on the set, on a screen, and then she is acting in front of that. So you're rephotographing the two together.
Guys, thank you very much. Here from 1939 with Judy Garland, Margaret Hamilton, and a fleet of flying monkeys, it's The Wizard of Oz.